Hi, friends. This is the Chasing Justice podcast. I am your host, Roslyn Hernández, and I'm the podcast producer at Chasing Justice. This season, we're talking about civic engagement and all that it can be. And in the past episodes, we've talked about things that are political, like voting and local government. We've talked about things that are more relational, like mutual aid. And today, we're talking about a Gen Z reality, which is college or school, right? How can we be involved if we are students, or what can we do at our school campus? So today we have Justin Guaman to talk to us about that. Justin is a Queens native of Ecuadorian descent. He has been on staff with InterVarsity for 5 years and is currently overseeing 2 student chapters in New York City. He has a degree in criminal justice from John Jay College and has been working with justice-impacted youth at Riker's Island, Harlem, and other New York City communities since 2018. And Justin's passion for this work is rooted in his own journey as a justice-impacted youth, and he nearly joined a gang and dropped out of high school before a transformative encounter with faith led him to pursue Jesus in a life of service at the intersection of faith and justice. Wow. Justin, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we already got a little bit about your story, but can you let us know a little bit more about how your experience as a justice-impacted youth and your work with justice-impacted youth led you to work with young adults on college campuses?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't grow up in church, and so a lot of the influences in my life were people from the hood, from the neighborhood. And so I visited a local church and encountered Jesus there. And I was giving a lot. I was serving a lot. I gave a lot to the church just because of the profound impact that God had in my life. And so once I got into college, I felt a sense of I felt overwhelmed, right? I felt sort of like I was burning out. And it was in college where I found a Christian fellowship that provided some space for me to just to be affirmed, just to be encouraged and mentored and supported. And it was really in that space where I realized there are people around me that are really encouraging me in my faith in Jesus. And that gave me the confidence to pursue what God had put in my heart, to pursue the work of justice, to pursue serving people who were marginalized in my neighborhood, right? And so after college, I thought to myself, I want this to be true for other people. I want people to see how their faith intersects with justice. And so, after college, I decided to come on staff with InterVarsity. And ever since then, I've just been facilitating spaces for students to grow in their faith and to find community that can encourage them and cultivate the voice that God has given them.
That's so awesome. If people have been listening along to this season, whenever we ask our guests, how did you start getting involved in what you're doing? A lot of the times it comes from a personal story of, when I was younger, I faced these kinds of issues in my neighborhood, or I saw other people go through this, or I want to, as you said, provide a space for people that I didn't have growing up until I got connected to a church.
Yeah. My church community had a profound impact, and the Christian fellowship on my campus. These were people who were encouraging me and mentoring me, and I think the work of justice for me was very scary in college because I was 19, I was 20, and I was afraid. I thought to myself, the work of justice feels overwhelming, and there's a lot to do. And I think just to have that sense of community, people that were speaking life and faith and hope over me, gave me the courage to serve my neighborhood, to serve my community.
I am so glad that you mentioned, I was scared. I thought it was overwhelming. It was a lot, but there were people around you that helped you through it. And what we want out of these podcasts is for people to understand it can be a lot, but you're not doing it by yourself. As you mentioned, there are people who are there to empower you, to support you, and there are different ways in which you can get connected. So what advice would you give a student who wants to speak out on social justice issues, but feels overwhelmed or afraid to take a stand?
I remember in college feeling fear and despair, but I also felt passion. And I was holding both of those things in tension. I remember I felt this sense of like, deep discontentment for someone in my neighborhood. His name is Edgar, and he's a houseless man. And I remember seeing him in the neighborhood and just feeling like our society should do something about this. And I should do something about this. And feeling just kind of like the invitation to like eat out with him, right? Take him out to eat and hear his story, and start to like invite our church to give financially, right? To say like, hey, can we support him? Can we buy him food? Can we buy him clothing? Can we find him a place? After a few weeks of just kind of meeting him and hanging out with him, I was like, hey, Mom, we have this extra room in our home, and I think we should invite him to live with us. Crazy story. Um, and I was just this like young 20-year-old, like I had this deep sense of like, we need to change this world, this unjust system that causes people to live in poverty and in addiction. And anyways, I think during that time, there were people in my church that was giving financially. There were mentors that were just really encouraging me and affirming me. And I think for many of us that feel afraid or overwhelmed in terms of pursuing the work of justice, the courage that I found specifically was in my community. What's most helpful when it comes to pursuing justice is finding a community of people that can speak hope and faith and life into you. Because those seasons, those moments where you're giving out, you're giving away, you're speaking truth. If we can find mentors, we can find friends, we can find people who can give us courage to continue to pursue the work of justice. We can find consistency in the work of justice. So I think there's also courage that we find like in taking care of ourselves. I realized there was a lot of emotions in that season that I was actually like suppressing, like feelings of like sadness and anger, and I didn't have like healthy outlets for that. And as a Latino man, you have this culture where you kind of grow up really discouraged when it comes to like crying or expressing sadness. I needed to find healthy outlets to release my sadness and my anger. And so I wonder what are ways that you can find courage in terms of taking care of yourself, finding outlets to release your sadness and your anger and whatever feelings that are coming up for you as you pursue justice.
That is such great advice. Like one of the first steps is taking care of yourself. And as I was listening, one of the things was also you listened, you were present. Sometimes I think we might think that we need to change this big situation, right? Like, let's end homelessness in the US. And you met one person and you got to know that one person, and then you invited that one person into your life and you became part of his life as well. And it wasn't like you're trying to change the system from the get-go. It's like meeting someone, you're listening, you're making sure that you're okay, and then you're like finding community that can help you take more courageous steps.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes we try to find the spectacular ways of pursuing justice. It's like what's going to be in the headlines and the news, and it's a very non-spectacular thing in the moment, right? To be with someone who's struggling with an addiction and mental health problems, and God used that small act of service, and that small act of service I think influenced my neighborhood, where people from my church were donating they were donating a TV and money for his haircut and clothing and getting him a job. And I remember people would like stop me in a neighborhood. They're like, oh, we heard about this story. Like, how can we support Edgar? Yeah, I think it just starts with that small act of service, and just seeing how other people can partner with you in that.
It sounds like you had a community when you were a college student that maybe is where you grew up. Some students go off to college and they're not close to their community. So what are some first steps for Gen Z individuals who are maybe on a college campus? What can they start doing to start the work of justice?
Yeah, that's real. That can feel really lonely and isolating. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of like seeking justice is doing it on your own or doing it in isolation. And so yeah, I want to acknowledge that is hard. That is difficult. I would say my encouragement would be to really just like start small, right? And have a posture of curiosity that can cultivate a sense of compassion with people on your campus. I think if you can go on campus and just be curious about the people in your classroom, the people, the different clubs and student association organizations that are there, if you can go to those spaces, right, and start to just ask questions. Ask people about their stories, ask people about the organizations or different student clubs that they're a part of, and just really allow that curiosity to cultivate in you like a sense of compassion for others. Because I think like in that like small act of humility, of connecting with people, of befriending people, especially people who don't believe like you or have different perspectives, I think that small act of humility of just connecting with folks in the hands of God, it becomes something big. I want to encourage students to connect, have a posture of curiosity, connect with folks, hear their stories, try to understand their social location, where are they coming from, their ethnic upbringing, their family stories, their cultural background. And I think if you can do that, people will start to see you as someone who is loving, right? Someone who is interested in knowing them as a person who holds the image of God in them, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think as you're mentioning, look for the places where you can be curious and learn more. I think back on my college years, and there was the Latino Student Union. It was called Congreso, where I went to school, and it was a place of safety for me in my Latinidad, and wherever I was in my Latinidad, and like decolonizing, but also it was a place where there were other folks who were more attuned to political interests or other social justice issues, and I learned so much from them. So it's not just a community where you go and learn, it's also a community where you're like acogido, like you're held. So I would say like look for ethnic communities or ethnic groups in your school campus, because it's a space of safety, but also a space where they challenge you with more information, with history, with your identity, to get more involved as well.
Yeah, that is so good. I remember as a college student just like having this hyper fixation for like joining just Christian groups, right? Like there's this Christian fellowship and I'm Christian, so let me just join them. And our room was actually shared with the Dreamers Club. And so that was an opportunity for me to actually connect with the undocumented students and community that were in that college, and to learn from them, to have just this posture of humility of like, wow, I actually need to know more about this system. I actually need to learn more from you, and also like how can we serve you in this time. And so yeah, I think finding different type of clubs that are already doing the work of like organizing and justice and activism on campus, and just learning from their workshops and activities.
Yeah, because workshops are a really big part of their programs and their activities. So yeah, learning from those clubs is really great. Are there any examples that you can share with us about any initiatives or any projects that you've been involved with that have made an impact on campus?
Yeah, what I usually see on campus are stuff initiated or organized by different clubs. So, for example, the Muslim Student Association. I remember visiting a few colleges in one week and seeing fundraisers. They were doing bake sales and different types of fundraisers to get money and to send to children that were in need in Gaza. And so there was this, I remember seeing just fundraisers happening on different college campuses and going to them and saying like, hey, like how can we like partner with you guys? How can we give? How can we organize and get students to support you guys? And there was in that moment there was sort of like some dissonance in that, because one, they saw this like Latino brown Christian man telling them like how can we support you? And that just felt disorientating. It was like, wait, you're Christian and you're actually asking to support us. And so in that moment, there was just a moment of reconciliation. I think just like, yeah, supporting, we were able to support the fundraisers that were happening on campus and really just participate in some of the protestings that have been happening on college campuses. The truth is, some of the protests that have been happening here in New York City, specifically in the area that I'm at, have been really hard and just difficult to organize, mainly because of just like academic kind of consequences that come with that. When a protest would come out, would be organized, there would be space for us to participate in that and be with them, to be present, was really encouraging for the students that were organizing protests on campus. I think being a presence in that space was really, really meaningful. And again, there was nothing spectacular about what we were doing. It was like, hey, here's money for your fundraiser. For the protest, it was like, oh, I'm making myself available to participate in this protest with you. Whether it's this protest that's set up here in the lawn, or getting some chalk and writing out some of the statistics and things that are happening in different countries and bringing awareness to other students. I think those small acts became really significant in their eyes.
What comes up for me from what you're saying too is that maybe sometimes we feel like we have to start something, but really as students, we don't really have to start things ourselves. There's a lot of stuff that's already started. And so joining with someone or with a group is a lot easier than starting something from scratch. And it's really what's really accessible on college campuses.
Right. There's like already work being done. There's already organizing being done. And really it's a matter of like partnering with the folks that are already leading the way and saying, hey, how can I bring food, right, to this protest? How can I bring water? I remember people bringing just croissants to a protest. And it was a meaningful thing because people were out for hours. And something as small as a water bottle and croissants, made the difference.
Yeah. So we've kind of been naming, like indirectly, some of the challenges that Gen Z might face when they're trying to make a difference. So maybe out of what we've been talking about, can you state more explicitly some of the challenges that you've seen Gen Z encounter on campus and some encouragement that can help them face those challenges?
Yeah. There's so many things that are challenging. There was a protest going on here at Queens College, the campus that I served at, and their president of the school came out with this letter, and it felt very much just one-sided, and it felt like it was silencing the Muslim students and the Palestinian students that attend this college. And I think some of the barriers are just like colleges and universities that are either silent or maybe they're speaking up, but they're not telling the whole story. And it feels really discouraging to have the university that is preparing you to become a world changer and giving you the tools to be someone who is going to impact the world is now the very school and entity that is actually trying to suppress your voice and stop you from making a difference. And so, yeah, I think just like colleges, universities, the way that they're using their policies and voices to silence students, it's a barrier. I also think of just the inaction and discouragement that students feel from either their peers, maybe even family members, just people that they dearly care about. And especially for folks who identify as Christian, if your church is not supporting you or affirming you, you feel a sense of isolation and loneliness in this work. And I always like to encourage students to find the people that can support them in this journey. So maybe there are family members that don't support you. Maybe there are, friends on campus that do not support you and speak against the type of justice that you're pursuing. I wonder who are the people that you can go to, who are the leaders, the mentors, the friends that you can sort of have a safe space, right, to talk about and process the things that you're experiencing. If we can find the safe people, right, and couple that with practices that help us to become emotionally healthy and spiritually healthy, I think we can pursue justice in really, really impactful ways.
Yeah, wow. Justin, thanks so much. I really do think that this is going to be so encouraging for a lot of folks who listen to our podcast. And you've given us so many like practical ideas and relational ideas and just, yeah, very clear ways to take a next step in our work of justice for those of us who are, in school campuses. So yeah, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
All right, friends, so that's all we have for you today. Remember that we want to hear from you as well. So drop us a comment on Instagram or YouTube and let's keep the conversation going. We want to hear all about how you're making change on your school campus or the steps that you're taking to do so. And if you haven't already, remember, share, like, follow, and subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes. Thanks for tuning in today. Stay engaged, stay curious, and let's keep chasing justice together. Bye.
Peace.
Whoop whoop.
Let's go.